What do you do when the man who swore to protect you, the man who gently kisses your pregnant belly each night, is the very same man living a stunningly deceitful double life? You're about to hear the story of Eleanor Vance, a woman who had it all, a thriving career, a luxurious home, and a husband she adored. But on one glittering evening at the city's most prestigious charity gala, her perfect world wasn't just shattered, it was publicly detonated. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story of calculated betrayal, a powerful family conspiracy, and the moment one woman decided she wouldn't just be a victim, she would be the victor. Stay tuned. Eleanor Vance believed in the architecture of a good life. As a partner at a boutique architectural firm in Boston, she designed spaces that were both beautiful and functional, built on foundations of integrity and clear sightlines. She believed her own life shared with her husband Julian was built to the same exacting standards. Their three-story brownstone in Beacon Hill was a testament to their success, a blend of historic charm and minimalist modernity she had designed herself. At 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, she felt the final crucial beam of their perfect life settling into place. Julian was the charismatic other half of their power couple image. A senior vice president at a private equity firm, he was sharp, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He had a way of making anyone he spoke to feel like the only person in the room. He was a doting husband, often bringing her flowers for no reason and massaging her swollen ankles after a long day. He would press his ear to her belly, whispering promises to their unborn son Liam. To the outside world, and even to Eleanor most of the time, the Vances were the blueprint for happiness. But even the most meticulously designed structures can have hidden flaws, hairline cracks that spread silently before the collapse. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. It arrived as a notification on her phone, a fraud alert from their joint black card account. Charge for $18,750 at Cartier. Please confirm this purchase. Eleanor frowned. She hadn't bought anything. Julian was in back-to-back meetings all day. She tapped no on the alert and called the credit card company, assuming it was a simple error. But the customer service agent was polite and firm. The purchase was made in person an hour ago at the Newberry Street boutique. Her husband, Mr. Julian Vance, had used the card. His signature was on file. Confusion gave way to a prickle of unease. $18,000. For what his mother's birthday was months away. Their anniversary had just passed. Perhaps it was a surprise for her, a push present, as her friends had joked about. But Julian wasn't one for extravagant surprises like that. He was meticulously practical, a planner. He would have discussed it. She decided to let it go, to wait for him to tell her. A surprise was still the most logical explanation. He came home that night kissing her deeply, his hands immediately going to her belly. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, his voice a warm, familiar melody. She smiled, waiting. "We're good. Long day for you." "Unbelievable. The Dalton merger is a beast." He sighed, loosening his tie. "You wouldn't believe the numbers." He talked about work all through dinner. He mentioned his team, the late nights ahead, the pressure from the board. Not a word about Cartier. Not a hint of a little velvet box. The unease returned a cold knot in her stomach. Why would he hide such a purchase? The cracks began to spread faster after that. There were the hushed phone calls he'd take in his study, closing the solid oak doors that were usually left open. When she'd walk by, his voice would drop to an indecipherable murmur. He started working late more often, coming home smelling not of his office but of a faint, unfamiliar perfume, something floral and sweet, a stark contrast to her own subtle sandalwood scent. When she asked about it, he'd laugh it off. "Must have been someone in the elevator, darling. You know how those scents cling." He became overly protective of his phone, which now lived face down on his nightstand. Once she reached for it to use the flashlight, and he snapped, "I'll get it," with a sharpness that startled them both. He apologized immediately, blaming stress, but the damage was done. The open sightlines of their life were suddenly filled with locked doors and hidden corners. Eleanor was an architect. She saw patterns. She understood that small, seemingly unrelated issues often pointed to a larger foundational problem. The late nights, the secret calls, the cloying scent of another woman's perfume, and the massive, unexplained jewelry purchase, they weren't separate cracks. They were mapping the fault line of a single catastrophic lie. The final piece of evidence she needed, the one that turned suspicion into devastating certainty, came a week before the annual Avery Foundation Benefit Gala. It was the social event of the season, and Julian's firm was a primary sponsor. He had a table, and they were expected to be the picture of marital bliss and corporate success. Eleanor was looking through their shared iPad for a dinner recipe when an email notification popped up at the top of the screen. It was from the Grand Astoria Hotel where the gala was being held. The subject line was simple: "Your reservation is confirmed." Her heart hammered against her ribs. He had already booked their room for the night of the gala weeks ago. Why would there be another confirmation? Her fingers trembled as she tapped it open. "Dear Mr. Vance, thank you for your booking. We are pleased to confirm your reservation for the Celestial Suite for the evening of Saturday, August 30th. Guest name Julian Vance, additional guest Chloe Sterling. Package romance celebration. Includes late checkout champagne on ice and a dozen red roses. Chloe Sterling." The name echoed in her mind. She'd heard Julian mention it once or twice. A new analyst in his department. Young, bright, fiercely ambitious. He'd called her a real shark. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs, a silent, crushing blow. It wasn't just a fling. This was a planned romantic rendezvous. In the same hotel. On the same night as the gala, where he would be sitting with his pregnant wife. The sheer audacity of it, the contemptuous disrespect, burned through her shock and straight into a cold, hard rage. The Cartier purchase slammed back into her mind. It wasn't a push present for her. It was a gift for Chloe. She stood in the center of her beautiful, perfectly designed kitchen, her hand resting protectively on her son, who was kicking gently within her. The foundation of her life hadn't just cracked, it had been dynamited. But Eleanor Vance was not a woman who would stand by and watch her life crumble. She was a builder, and if she had to, she would be a demolitions expert. She looked at the date on the confirmation. Saturday, August 30th. 3 days from now. The gala. He wasn't just going to cheat on her. He was planning to humiliate her under the same roof. A chilling calm settled over her. He thought she was fragile, distracted by the pregnancy. He thought she was oblivious. He had underestimated her. The Avery Gala would still be a night of revelations, she decided. But she would be the one writing the script. The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception, a performance worthy of an Oscar. Eleanor moved through her life with a preternatural calm, a serene smile fixed on her face. On the surface, she was the glowing, expectant mother discussing nursery colors and birth plans. Beneath, she was a general plotting a war. The rage hadn't subsided. It had solidified, sharpening into a diamond-hard point of focus. She called her best friend Sarah Chen, a litigation lawyer known for her take-no-prisoners attitude in the courtroom. She met her at a quiet cafe far from their usual neighborhood haunts. Without preamble, Eleanor laid out the evidence, the credit card statement from Cartier. She had since pulled up the hotel confirmation, the pattern of lies. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from sympathy to a cold fury that mirrored Eleanor's own. The Celestial Suite, the romance celebration package, the absolute nerve of that man. Sarah hissed, her fingers drumming on the table. "Okay, Ellie, we have 2 options. Option A, you pack a bag, I send my most vicious divorce attorney to his office Monday morning and we bleed him dry. Quietly, efficiently." "And option B?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady. Sarah leaned forward, a glint in her eye. "Option B is the one I know you want. You confront him, but not now. Not in the privacy of your beautiful home where he can spin more lies and gaslight you into oblivion. You do it on your terms, on your stage." "The gala," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. "The gala," Sarah confirmed. In front of his partners, his clients, his rivals. In front of his insufferable mother. You don't scream, you don't cry. You are grace and steel. You present the facts as coldly and clearly as an architect presenting a blueprint. You let his public image burn to the ground. And I'll be right there with you. The plan began to take shape. Sarah would be her second-in-command, her witness. The first step was preparation. Eleanor went to her final dress fitting for the gala. The gown was a custom-made creation by a local designer, a deep emerald green silk that draped elegantly over her 7-month bump, with intricate beading at the shoulders that caught the light like tiny shards of glass. When she first commissioned it, she thought of it as a celebration of her pregnancy of her life with Julian. Now she saw it as armor. The day of the gala, the performance continued. She let Julian kiss her goodbye that morning, a phantom touch that made her skin crawl. "Big night tonight, darling," he'd said, smiling. "You'll be the most beautiful woman there." "I can't wait," she'd replied, her own smile feeling like a mask. She spent the day methodically preparing. She had her hair styled in a sophisticated chignon, her makeup done professionally to highlight her eyes and give her a look of untouchable elegance. Every detail was a piece of her battle armor. She printed out the Cartier receipt. She printed out the hotel confirmation for the Celestial Suite with Chloe Sterling's name clearly visible. She folded them neatly and tucked them into her small beaded clutch. As the evening approached, Julian came home to change. He was buoyant, humming as he put on his tuxedo. He looked at her resplendent in her emerald gown, and his eyes widened with what looked like genuine admiration. "Eleanor," he breathed, walking over to her. "You are stunning, absolutely breathtaking." He placed his hands on her belly. "Liam is a lucky boy to have such a gorgeous mother." For a fleeting second, her resolve wavered. The man she loved, the life she had built, was she really about to set a torch to it all? The baby kicked a hard, insistent thump against Julian's hand as if reminding her of the future she was fighting for. The wavering stopped. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about protecting her son from a legacy of lies. She smiled coolly. "You look very handsome too, Julian. It's going to be an unforgettable night." "It certainly is," he said, completely oblivious to the double meaning. The drive to the Grand Astoria Hotel was thick with unspoken words. The city lights of Boston blurred past the window of the town car. Julian chattered about the people who would be there, the networking he needed to do. Eleanor simply nodded her hand, resting on her clutch, the sharp corners of the printed papers a grounding reality against her fingertips. They arrived. The entrance to the hotel's grand ballroom was a spectacle of flashing cameras and socialites in designer gowns. Julian took her arm, plastering on his public smile. "Here we go," he whispered, guiding her onto the red carpet. They posed for the photographers, a perfect picture of wealth and happiness. Eleanor's smile was brilliant, unwavering. She knew the cameras were capturing a before photo. There would be no after. Inside the ballroom was a sea of glittering crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, and the hum of 100 conversations. They found their table sponsored by Julian's firm, filled with his partners and their spouses. Eleanor greeted them all warmly, accepting compliments on her dress and her glow. She scanned the room, her eyes moving with deliberate slowness. And then she saw her. Across the ballroom, standing near the bar, was a young woman in a fire engine red dress that was both too tight and too revealing for the occasion. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, her eyes darting around the room with a hungry ambition. Eleanor didn't need an introduction. She knew with every fiber of her being that this was Chloe Sterling. But the most chilling detail was the diamond tennis bracelet on the woman's wrist. It glittered under the chandeliers, a vulgar beacon. It was brand new, its diamonds catching the light with a fiery brilliance. Eleanor's mind flashed to the $18,750 charge at Cartier. Her breath hitched, but her expression remained serene. Then she saw Julian's mother, Genevieve Vance, approaching their table. A formidable woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a gaze that could freeze fire, Genevieve had only ever offered Eleanor a frosty tolerance. She saw Eleanor as not quite up to the Vance standard. "Eleanor," Genevieve said, her voice clipped. "You look, well, pregnancy seems to agree with you." It was the closest she could come to a compliment. "Genevieve," Eleanor replied, her tone even. "Lovely to see you." Genevieve's eyes flickered across the room past Eleanor's shoulder. For a split second her gaze softened, a flicker of something like approval in her eyes as she looked towards the bar, towards the woman in the red dress. And in that instant Eleanor understood a new horrifying truth. Genevieve didn't just know about the affair, she approved of it. The final piece of armor clicked into place. This wasn't just a battle against her husband. It was a war against his family. And she was completely, utterly alone. Except for Sarah, who caught her eye from a nearby table and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "It's time." The evening wore on, a symphony of clinking glasses, polite laughter, and the droning speeches of philanthropists. Eleanor played her part, engaging in small talk, smiling at Julian's anecdotes, a portrait of serene motherhood. All the while her senses were heightened, tracking Julian's movements, his stolen glances across the room. She watched him excuse himself, supposedly to network with the mayor's aide, and saw his path deviate towards the bar, towards the red dress. This was the moment. She waited a full minute, letting him get comfortable in his lie. Then she rose slowly from her seat, her emerald dress shimmering. "Excuse me for a moment," she said to the table at large, her voice calm and light. "I think I need to stretch my legs." She walked not towards the powder room, but directly towards the bar. Each step was deliberate, a slow, inexorable advance. The crowd seemed to part for the pregnant woman in the stunning green gown. She could feel their eyes on her, admiring glances that would soon turn to shock. She saw them before they saw her. Julian and Chloe. They were tucked into a small alcove partially obscured by a marble pillar. His back was to her, but his posture was intimate, one hand resting on the small of Chloe's back. Chloe was looking up at him, her expression a nauseating mix of adoration and triumph. The diamond bracelet, her family's money, her child's inheritance, was a cruel fire on the woman's wrist. They were laughing, sharing a private joke. Eleanor stopped just a few feet away, the ambient noise of the gala seeming to fade into a dull roar in her ears. "Julian," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their private bubble like a shard of ice. Julian froze. He turned around and the color drained from his face. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. His eyes darted from Eleanor to Chloe, panic flickering within them. "Eleanor, darling," he stammered, taking a step towards her, trying to physically block Chloe from her view. "I was just discussing a market analysis with Miss Sterling. She's one of our sharpest new talents." Chloe Sterling's smug smile faltered slightly, but she held her ground, looking Eleanor up and down with a dismissive air. It was the look of a woman who believed she had already won, that Eleanor was a temporary bloated obstacle soon to be removed. Eleanor ignored her completely. Her eyes, cold and clear, were locked on her husband. "A market analysis," she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Is that what you call it? It must be a very in-depth analysis to require a romance celebration package in the celestial suite upstairs." Julian's jaw went slack. He looked as if she had physically struck him. What are you talking about? You're not making any sense. You must be tired, honey the baby." "Don't," she cut him off, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than a shout. "Do not use our son as an excuse for your filth." Chloe, seeing Julian falter, decided to step in. It was a fatal miscalculation. "Look," she said, stepping forward, a condescending smirk on her face. "I don't know what you think you heard, but Julian and I are colleagues. Maybe you should control your pregnancy hormones." This was the moment Eleanor had been waiting for. The direct engagement. She finally turned her gaze to Chloe, a slow, deliberate act of dismissal. She looked at the garish red dress, the overly ambitious makeup, and finally at the glittering bracelet on her wrist. "This bracelet," Eleanor said, her voice ringing with newfound clarity, "was purchased for $18,750 last Tuesday at Cartier on Newberry Street, using my family's joint account." She didn't look at Chloe's face, only at the bracelet as if addressing an inanimate object. It was purchased as a gift. But I think there's been a mistake. You see, the gift was for a mistress, and you are merely a symptom. A temporary diversion. The bracelet, however, is a marital asset. I'd like it back. A small gasp came from a woman standing nearby who had stopped to listen. The bubble of silence around them was expanding. People were turning, conversations were dying down. The drama was far more interesting than any keynote speaker. Chloe blanched instinctively, covering the bracelet with her other hand. I don't know what you're talking about. Julian gave this to me. I know he did, Eleanor said calmly. She opened her clutch and removed the folded Cartier receipt. She held it out not for Chloe, but for Julian. Here is the proof of purchase, and Julian? She continued, her voice gaining strength as the audience grew. Since you seem to be confused about your plans for the evening, perhaps this will refresh your memory. She pulled out the second piece of paper, the hotel confirmation. She unfolded it and held it up. Her hands were perfectly steady. This is a confirmation for the Celestial Suite. Tonight. Check-in was an hour ago. The reservation is for 2 guests, Julian Vance and Chloe Sterling. She paused, letting the names hang in the suddenly silent ballroom. It even includes champagne and roses. How thoughtful. Julian was speechless, his face a mask of horror. He was exposed, his carefully constructed world imploding in the most public way imaginable. He looked around at the faces of his colleagues, his clients all staring at him with a mixture of shock and pity. Eleanor turned her attention back to Chloe one last time. You are in a room full of the most powerful people in this city wearing a stolen bracelet and planning a rendezvous with another woman's husband. This is not the grand entrance into society you thought it was. This is your professional and social suicide note. Chloe's arrogant facade finally crumbled, replaced by fear and humiliation. Tears welled in her eyes. Julian, she whimpered, looking at him for help. But Julian couldn't even look at her. He was staring at Eleanor, at the ruins of his life. Now, Eleanor said, her voice resonating with authority through the cavernous room. I believe it's time for you to leave. The silence in the Grand Astoria ballroom was absolute. It was a heavy-weighted silence, thick with scandal and the intoxicating thrill of someone else's spectacular ruin. The band had faltered mid-song, the string quartet holding their bows aloft as if frozen in time. Every eye was on the tableau, by the marble pillar, the regal pregnant wife, the disgraced husband, and the weeping mistress. Eleanor didn't need to raise her voice. Her words had been a precision strike, and now she just had to watch the fallout. She looked past her husband, her gaze sweeping the room until it landed on the hotel's head of security, a stern-looking man named Mr. Davies, who was already moving purposefully in their direction, his earpiece crackling. Julian finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled whisper. Eleanor, please, not here. We can talk about this at home. Please don't do this. Talk. Eleanor's laugh was a short, bitter sound. The time for talking was before you bought another woman jewelry with our money. Before you booked a suite to sleep with her in the same building as your pregnant wife. The time for talking is over, Julian. This is the time for consequences. Mr. Davies arrived, flanked by 2 other uniformed security guards. He addressed Eleanor with quiet respect. Mrs. Vance, is there a problem here? No problem at all, Mr. Davies, Eleanor said, her tone perfectly composed. Just a small misunderstanding. This woman, she gestured towards Chloe without looking at her, seems to be under the impression that she is a guest at this private event. She is not on the guest list for our table, nor for any other, I believe. She is also in possession of stolen property. Chloe gasped, a fresh wave of tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. It's not stolen. He gave it to me, she cried, her voice rising with hysteria. The spectacle was getting better by the second for the onlookers. Mr. Davies said, his voice a low, implacable rumble. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. No, Julian, do something! Chloe shrieked, grabbing Julian's arm. Julian shook her off, his survival instincts finally kicking in. He was trying to distance himself to salvage something from the wreckage. "I don't know what she's talking about," he said weakly, looking at Mr. Davies. "This is a private matter between my wife and me. This employee is just confused." "Confused?" Eleanor's voice was laced with ice. "She seemed perfectly clear on the room number of the Celestial Suite. Perhaps you can ask her to recite the details of the romance celebration package you so generously booked for her." The crowd murmured. The humiliation was exquisite, a slow public dissection. One of the female security guards gently took Chloe's arm. "Miss, please, let's go." Chloe resisted, her face contorting in a mask of ugly desperation. "You can't do this. I work for him. I'm his girlfriend," she screamed. The final fatal admission. The collective intake of breath in the ballroom was audible. Julian flinched as if he'd been shot. The word girlfriend erased any possibility of this being a simple one-time mistake. It spoke of a relationship, of a planned future, of a deeper betrayal. Eleanor looked at her husband and saw the full measure of his weakness. He didn't defend Chloe. He didn't defend himself. He simply stood there paralyzed by his own public immolation. Then she looked over at her mother-in-law's table. Genevieve Vance was watching her face a mask of stone-cold fury. Not at her son for his betrayal, Eleanor realized, but at Eleanor for exposing it. The security guards were firm now, their professionalism overriding any sympathy. They each took one of Chloe's arms and began to escort her towards the exit. Her protests became undignified sobs. She stumbled, her red dress hiking up her thighs. The entire room watched her shame. They watched as she was led past the tables of Boston's elite. Her head bowed, the glittering diamond bracelet on her wrist seeming to mock her. It was a long, silent walk of shame. The only sound was the clicking of the guards' shoes on the marble floor, and Chloe's pathetic whimpers. As she passed the main doors and was guided out into the hotel lobby and out of sight, a sense of finality settled over the room. The show was over. Eleanor turned back to Julian. His face was ashen. His partners at the table were staring at him, their expressions a mixture of disgust and cold calculation. They weren't just seeing a cheating husband, they were seeing a liability, a man with catastrophic judgment. "I think," Eleanor said, her voice clear and carrying in the renewed silence, "that we are leaving now." She didn't wait for his reply. She turned and began to walk towards the exit. Her head held high. She could feel every eye in the room on her back. They weren't looks of pity. They were looks of awe, of respect. She had walked into the lion's den, faced the beasts, and walked out the victor. The crowd parted for her as she walked, a silent corridor of respect opening in her path. She passed Sarah, who gave her a look of profound pride. She didn't look at Genevieve. She didn't look at anyone. She just walked, her posture perfect, her emerald gown flowing behind her. She was the architect of this moment, and she had built it to perfection. Julian jolted out of his stupor, scrambled to follow her, mumbling apologies to his partners. He caught up to her in the grand lobby, grabbing her arm. "Eleanor, wait. Let me explain." She stopped and turned to face him. The fury she had kept so tightly coiled was now visible in her eyes. "Explain what, Julian? Explain how you thought you could build a second life behind my back while I was building a nursery for our son. There is nothing to explain. There is only what you have done." She pulled her arm from his grasp. "Don't touch me. Don't follow me. I will have my friend Sarah pick up some of my things tomorrow. You can speak to my lawyer on Monday." She turned and walked out of the Grand Astoria Hotel, leaving her husband standing alone amidst the wreckage of his life. The cool night air hit her face, a welcome balm. She hadn't cried. She hadn't screamed. She had simply taken a detonator to her life's foundation and blown it up on her own terms. The rebuilding could start tomorrow. The drive home in a taxi was a silent, surreal blur. The glittering lights of Boston, which had always felt like a promise, now seemed harsh and indifferent. Eleanor stared out the window, her hand resting on her belly, the hard dome a comfort, a reality in a world that had just been rendered completely false. The adrenaline that had coursed through her during the confrontation was beginning to recede, leaving behind a profound bone-deep exhaustion. She paid the driver and walked up the stone steps to her beautiful brownstone. Their home. The word felt like a lie. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence was absolute. The soft lighting she'd designed to be warm and welcoming now felt hollow, illuminating a museum of a dead marriage. Photos of them smiling on their wedding day on a trip to Italy at last year's gala mocked her from the walls. She went straight upstairs to the nursery. The room was almost complete. The walls were a soft, calming gray. A handcrafted wooden crib stood against one wall, a mobile of gently spinning planets hanging above it. A comfortable rocking chair sat in the corner. This was the room she had poured all her love and hope into. This was the future. Her future. Liam's future. It was a future that no longer included Julian. The thought brought not a fresh wave of anger, but a deep, sorrowful ache. An hour later, she heard his key in the door. She heard his hesitant footsteps in the hall, then on the stairs. She didn't move from the rocking chair in the nursery. She remained still, a silent sentinel in the room dedicated to innocence. He appeared in the doorway, his tuxedo disheveled, his face pale and drawn. He looked utterly defeated. "Ellie," he began, his voice raspy. "Don't call me that," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You've lost the right." He flinched. "Eleanor, I am so sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I've destroyed everything. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake." "A mistake." She repeated the word, tasting like poison. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is taking a wrong turn. Systematically lying for months, funneling our money to another woman and planning a romantic getaway in the same hotel where you are attending a gala with your pregnant wife is not a mistake, Julian. It's a strategy, a campaign of deceit." "It didn't mean anything, Chloe. She was just an escape. The pressure at work, the baby coming. I panicked. I was stupid." Eleanor finally looked at him, her eyes burning with a cold fire he had never seen before. "The baby coming, you panicked because our son, the child we planned and wanted, was on his way. Is that the pathetic excuse you're going with?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "No, I can't explain it, but I can fix it. I'll end it with her. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. We can save this." "Save this." She let out a hollow laugh. "Julian, you think this is about another woman? I could almost forgive an affair. I could understand weakness, a moment of stupidity. But it's so much more than that, isn't it?" She stood up and walked towards him, her presence filling the room. "The money, Julian. The $18,000 was just the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? Where else has our money been going?" His eyes widened in genuine shock, and in that moment she knew she had hit another nerve, one deeper and more rotten than simple infidelity. "What are you talking about?" He deflected, but his voice was unsteady. "I'm an architect, Julian. I look at the whole structure," she said, her voice dropping lower. "And our financial structure has some serious cracks. I pulled our statements this afternoon, not just the credit cards. Our investment portfolios, our savings. There are transfers, large ones, to an LLC I've never heard of. Sterling Futures LLC. He was completely white now. That's a business venture. A side investment. An investment with Chloe Sterling, she shot back. How much, Julian? How much of our money, the money we were saving for this house, for our child's future, have you funneled into a business venture with your mistress? He couldn't answer. The silence was his confession. The betrayal was deeper than she could have ever imagined. He hadn't just given her a piece of his body. He had given her a piece of their future, of their son's security. As if on cue, the silence was broken by the sharp ring of the doorbell. They both froze. Who would be here at this hour? Julian looked relieved for the interruption. I'll get it. Eleanor followed him down the stairs. He opened the door and, standing on their stoop, wrapped in a chic Burberry trench coat despite the mild evening, was his mother. Genevieve Vance swept past Julian without a word, her icy gaze landing on Eleanor. "I assume he has told you that I am here to collect his things," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with venom. She wasn't here to mediate or apologize. She was here to choose a side. "What?" Julian looked utterly bewildered. "Mother, what are you doing?" "I am doing what you are too weak to do yourself, Julian," she snapped, turning on him. "I am ending this farce. You have humiliated the Vance name tonight, not because of your dalliance, but because you were caught. And you were caught because you married a woman with no class, no discretion, and no understanding of how our world works." She turned her full fury on Eleanor. You think you won something tonight? You think that pathetic theatrical display in front of our friends and colleagues was a victory? All you did was air our family's dirty laundry and drag our name through the mud. A proper wife would have handled this with dignity, privately. Eleanor was stunned into silence for a moment by the sheer unmitigated audacity. "A proper wife," she finally managed to say. "A proper wife doesn't have to compete with a mistress her mother-in-law is championing from the sidelines. You knew. You saw her at the gala. You approved of her." "Of course I knew," Genevieve sneered. "Chloe Sterling is from a good family. She understands what a man like Julian needs. She is ambitious and supportive, not distracted by nesting and other domestic trivialities. She was a far more suitable choice." The cruelty of the words, especially spoken in front of the nursery door, was a physical blow. This wasn't just Julian's betrayal. This was a calculated plot, a conspiracy to replace her. "You wanted him to leave me," Eleanor whispered, the horror of it dawning on her. "For her. I wanted my son to be with a woman who could advance his station, not hold him back," Genevieve stated coldly. "The money Julian invested with her, that was my idea. A way to set them up, to give him a safety net for when he finally came to his senses and left you." Julian looked between his mother and his wife, a man utterly broken by two powerful women. "Mother, stop, please." But Genevieve was relentless. "It's a shame about the baby, of course. A loose end. But it can be managed. Now, Julian, pack a bag. You're staying with me." Eleanor stared at the woman who had just admitted to orchestrating the systematic destruction of her life and the pillaging of her family's finances. The wound wasn't just deep, it was poisoned. She had been fighting a two-front war without even knowing it. She looked at Julian, her husband, who stood by silently letting his mother speak these monstrous things. He was not just a cheat and a liar, he was a coward, utterly, irredeemably weak. And in that moment of absolute devastation, something inside Eleanor hardened for good. The sorrow was gone, burned away by a white-hot, purifying rage. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about survival. It was about justice. "Get out!" Eleanor said, her voice low and trembling with controlled fury. "I beg your pardon," Genevieve scoffed. "Get out of my house." Eleanor enunciated each word. She pointed at Julian. "Both of you, take what you need for one night. The rest will be sent to whatever hole you crawl into. If you are not both out of this house in 10 minutes, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Genevieve looked ready to argue, but something in Eleanor's eyes, a terrifying, unbreakable resolve, made her stop. She gave a curt nod to Julian. "Fine, let's go." Eleanor stood unmoving as they hurried upstairs. She heard them gathering things, the sounds of drawers opening and closing. 10 minutes later they descended, Julian carrying an overnight bag, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Genevieve walked ahead of him, her head held high, defeated but unbowed. At the door, Julian paused, turning to her one last time. "Eleanor, "Goodbye, Julian," she said, cutting him off. She closed the solid oak door behind them, shutting them out of her life. She leaned her forehead against the cool wood, her body trembling not with sorrow but with the sheer force of her own anger. They thought they had destroyed her. They thought she was a loose end. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The architect was about to become a wrecking ball. The Monday morning after the gala felt like the dawn of a new, desolate era. Eleanor sat in the glass-walled conference room of Sarah Chen's law firm, the Boston skyline, a stark, indifferent backdrop. The home that had been her sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum, every object a relic of a life that was a lie. Sarah had already put her in touch with the best divorce attorney in the city, a sharp, elegant woman named Olivia Morgan. Olivia listened patiently as Eleanor recounted the entire story from the Cartier bracelet to Genevieve's venomous confession. Her face remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "The infidelity is straightforward," Olivia said when Eleanor had finished, her voice calm and authoritative. "The public humiliation at the gala gives you immense leverage. But the financial aspect, the Sterling Futures LLC, that's where we hit them hard. This isn't just infidelity, it's fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. It's a calculated financial deception." Genevieve admitted it was her idea. Eleanor added, her voice still raw. "She said it was to give him a safety net for when he left me." Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "She admitted this to you directly? Was anyone else there?" "Just Julian, and he didn't deny it. He said nothing. He just stood there, a coward." Olivia tapped her pen on a legal pad. "It's your word against theirs then. A he said she said situation. We can subpoena the bank records for the LLC, trace the funds. It will be a long, ugly fight. The Vances are a powerful family. They'll try to bury us in paperwork and bleed you dry emotionally and financially." A wave of despair washed over Eleanor. She had won the public battle, but the war ahead seemed insurmountable. She thought of her baby, of the legal fees, of the sheer energy it would take to fight a family as entrenched and ruthless as the Vances. For the first time, she felt a flicker of fear. That evening, as she was sorting through baby clothes, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Vance?" The voice was male, older, with a weary, patrician tone she didn't recognize. "Who is this?" she asked, cautious. There was a pause. "My name is Arthur Vance. I'm Julian's father." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Was he calling to threaten her to join his wife in her crusade? "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hardening. "To help you," he said simply. The words were so unexpected she was momentarily speechless. "My dear, I am so profoundly sorry for what my son and my wife have done to you. There is no excuse for their behavior. It is monstrous." "Why are you telling me this?" Eleanor asked, still suspicious. Arthur Vance was a figurehead in the family, a quiet, scholarly man who was always overshadowed by his domineering wife. Eleanor had barely exchanged more than a few pleasantries with him over the years. "Because," Arthur sighed, a lifetime of regret in the sound, "I have been a silent partner in Genevieve's ambitions for far too long. I have watched her mold our son into a man I no longer recognize, a man who values status above integrity. What she did to you, planning your replacement, stealing your future, it was the final unforgivable act. The Vance name used to stand for something. Honor, decency. She and Julian have turned it into a currency for their own greed." He paused again. "I cannot undo the pain they have caused you, but I can give you the tools to ensure they do not profit from it. I can give you justice." "What kind of tools?" Eleanor asked, her heart beginning to pound. "Meet me tomorrow, noon, the Boston Athenaeum Library. I'll be in the reading room on the 5th floor. Come alone." He hung up before she could respond. The next day, Eleanor walked into the hallowed silence of the Athenaeum, a private library that felt like a step back in time. She found Arthur Vance in a secluded corner surrounded by towering shelves of leather-bound books. He looked older than she remembered, his shoulders slumped, with a weight she was only now beginning to understand. He gestured to the chair opposite him. On the table between them was a thick leather briefcase. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't either," she admitted. "For 30 years," he began, his voice low, "I have allowed Genevieve to run our family and our son's life. I retreated into my books, my history. I told myself it was peaceful. But it was cowardice, the same cowardice I see in my son." He looked her directly in the eye. "You, Eleanor, are not a coward. What you did at that gala was the bravest thing I have seen in a very long time. You held a mirror up to them and they were horrified by their own reflection." He slid the briefcase across the table. "Genevieve was careless. She believes she is untouchable. Over the years, she and Julian have become involved in questionable financial practices, not just siphoning your marital assets. They have been using the Vance Family Trust, which I am the primary trustee of, as their personal slush fund, shuffling money through shell corporations, including Sterling Futures, to avoid taxes and hide risky, unsanctioned investments." He tapped the briefcase. "This contains everything. Bank statements, internal memos from Julian's computer that I accessed, correspondence between him and my wife discussing their plans, evidence of tax fraud and embezzlement that goes far beyond what they did to you. This is not just a divorce case anymore, Eleanor. This is a federal crime." Eleanor stared at the briefcase. It felt like a bomb. "Why are you giving this to me? This will destroy them. Your own son." Arthur's eyes were filled with a profound sadness. "My son destroyed himself when he chose his mother's greed over his wife and unborn child. I am not destroying him. I am simply holding him accountable. Something I should have done years ago." He sighed. "This information will not only guarantee you a divorce settlement that will secure your and your son's future for life, but it will also give you the power to dismantle Genevieve's empire of influence. You can expose them, or you can use this as leverage to get exactly what you want quietly. The choice, he said, standing up, is yours. Do with it what you will." He gave her a sad, small smile. "You are a good woman, Eleanor. You would have been a wonderful daughter. I wish you and my grandson a life of peace." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the labyrinth of books, leaving Eleanor alone with the weapon that could either win her war quietly or burn her enemies to the ground. She looked down at the briefcase. Her alliance had come from the most unexpected corner imaginable. This was no longer just about her. This was about dismantling a corrupt dynasty. And she had the blueprints. Eleanor walked into Olivia Morgan's office the next morning with the leather briefcase and a newfound sense of power. The exhaustion and fear had been replaced by a cold, clear-eyed resolve. As Olivia and her forensic accounting team sifted through the contents of the briefcase, their professional calm slowly turned to unconcealed shock. "My God, Eleanor," Olivia said, looking up from a particularly damning document. "This isn't just a smoking gun. This is an entire arsenal. Tax fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. This goes far beyond family court. The SEC would have a field day with this." The strategy shifted immediately. This was no longer about a contentious divorce. It was about a controlled demolition. Olivia drafted a letter to Julian's and Genevieve's legal team. It didn't mention an affair or emotional distress. It was a cold, clinical summary of the financial crimes they had uncovered, complete with a few sample documents as proof. The letter stated Eleanor's terms. 1. Julian would agree to an uncontested divorce, ceding full sole custody of their son to Eleanor. 2. He would relinquish all claims to the Beacon Hill brownstone. 3. He would transfer 75% of all known marital assets, including his pension and stock portfolio, into a trust for their son Liam. 4. Furthermore, Genevieve Vance would personally reimburse the Vance Family Trust for every dollar she had embezzled with interest, and cede her controlling stake in several key family holdings to a trustee of Arthur's choosing. The final condition was the hammer blow. If these terms were not met within 48 hours, the entire contents of the briefcase would be delivered to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The response was swift and panicked. The Vances' lawyer, a blustering man known for his aggressive tactics, called Olivia in a fury, accusing them of blackmail. Olivia calmly replied, "It's not blackmail, sir. It's a settlement offer. Your clients can accept it or they can prepare for a federal investigation. The choice is theirs." Checkmate. Julian and Genevieve were trapped. A public divorce was one thing. A federal prison sentence was another. They folded completely. Within 2 days, the papers were signed. Eleanor was free and she was financially secure beyond her wildest dreams. More importantly, her son's future was protected, insulated forever from the toxicity of the Vance family. Julian's fall from grace was meteoric. News of the settlement leaked within his firm. Combined with the public humiliation from the gala, his position became untenable. He was quietly forced to resign. His career in private equity finished. Chloe Sterling had been fired the Monday after the gala, her reputation in Boston's tight-knit financial community irrevocably destroyed. She disappeared, another casualty of a war she hadn't understood. Genevieve Vance was stripped of her power. Arthur, with the leverage Eleanor had given him, reasserted control over the family trust, dismantling the web of deceit his wife had spun. Genevieve was left a queen with no kingdom, her social standing shattered, confined to a life of quiet shame. 2 months later, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She named him Liam Arthur Vance, a quiet tribute to the man who had given her justice. On a bright, crisp autumn afternoon, Eleanor sat in the rocking chair in the nursery holding her sleeping son. The brownstone, once a symbol of a broken dream, now felt truly hers. It was a sanctuary she had fought for and won. She looked around the room at the life she was building, a life founded not on lies but on her own strength and resilience. She had lost a husband and a life she thought she loved. But in the ashes, she had found something far more valuable: herself. She was not just a survivor of Julian Vance's betrayal. She was the architect of her own destiny. She had faced the fire and walked out, not burned but forged anew, a phoenix rising with her son in her arms, ready to build a future on a foundation of unshakable truth. The view from here was clear. The sight lines were open, and the structure was sound. It was a life built to last. Eleanor's story is a powerful, gut-wrenching reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayal. It's a story about how a foundation of lies can never support a life, and how true strength is often forged in the most devastating fires. She didn't just get mad, she got smart. She used her intelligence, her courage, and an unexpected alliance to reclaim not just her life, but her power. What do you think of Eleanor's incredible journey from heartbreak to triumph? Could you have been as calm and calculated as she was at that gala? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear a story of strength and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.
They say a gilded cage is still a cage. But what happens when the door slams shut on a woman who's carrying the next heir of a millionaire empire? One evening, Vivian Stockbridge stepped onto the marble floors of her husband's palatial mansion, only to be turned away at the gates, pregnant, exhausted, and heartbroken. Little did anyone know within hours her name would blaze across the biggest electronic ticker on Wall Street. A tale of betrayal and triumph awaits. Get ready to witness how a discarded wife transforms heartbreak into the ultimate victory, changing the destiny of an entire family empire forever. Inside the imposing gates of the Stockbridge mansion, the night was unusually quiet. No classical music echoed from hidden speakers. No staff hurried across the polished floors. The grand double doors, always inviting for lavish gatherings, stood shut and cold. Vivian Stockbridge stood in the driveway, a single suitcase at her feet, feeling the chill of the evening. A faint neon glow from the city skyline lit up her face, revealing deep circles under her eyes and the unmistakable flush of pregnancy on her cheeks. She had left for a prenatal checkup that morning, expecting to return and rest. Instead, the moment she stepped out of the hired car, she found the mansion's security detail waiting. Heavy-shouldered men in crisp black suits had approached her. They were stoic, arms crossed as one quietly informed her, "Mrs. Stockbridge, we are under instructions. You cannot enter the premises." For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She'd never imagined this day would come where she, the so-called queen of the Stockbridge Empire, would be banished. Her gaze flicked to the enormous iron gates, usually parted wide, for her now locked like an impenetrable fortress. That fortress belonged to her husband, Ryan Stockbridge, the same man who had once called her his greatest love story. The guards shifted uncomfortably, recognizing her predicament. They all knew she was carrying Ryan's child, the next Stockbridge heir. But the chain of command was unbreakable, and Ryan's orders were law. Vivian tried to swallow her shock and keep her composure. It wasn't just about her dignity. It was about the tiny life growing inside her. She couldn't afford to collapse. Her phone buzzed, and she fumbled to retrieve it from her coat pocket. A single text message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "Leave quietly. Don't make a scene. This is Ryan's final word." Vivian bit down on her lip, fighting back tears. She had to think fast. She could beg, but she refused. She could demand, but that might jeopardize her child's future. Instead, she took a deep breath, gave the guards a polite nod, and whispered, Tell him I understand." With trembling hands, she turned away and walked slowly down the driveway, her suitcase wheels clattering on the cobblestone. Behind her, the guards shut the gates, the clang echoing through the night like a judge's gavel. A swirling mixture of heartbreak and betrayal consumed Vivian. How had it come to this point? She reached into her coat again, this time pulling out a small, folded ultrasound picture. In it was the first image of her baby, the child she believed would bring unity to the Stockbridge family. Instead, she felt like an outcast, with nowhere to go but forward. Even then, Vivian couldn't have predicted that by morning the Stockbridge name would be overshadowed by hers, on the front page of every financial newspaper in America. Ryan Stockbridge was a formidable figure in the world of finance. Born into unimaginable wealth, he had multiplied his family's fortune through risky takeovers, bold acquisitions, and an uncanny knack for reading the market. His father, Harvey Stockbridge, had once rubbed elbows with the likes of Warren Buffett and the late Steve Jobs investing in Apple before it became a tech titan. Ryan grew up in the world of Forbes billionaires' elite clubs and annual galas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But behind the glossy magazine covers and philanthropic appearances, the Stockbridge home was a pressure cooker. Ever since Ryan's mother, Celeste, passed away, the mansion had been run under the watchful eye of Ryan's father. Harvey Stockbridge could be a man of warmth in public, donating generously to children's hospitals, but in private, he was ruthless. He regarded women with suspicion, convinced that they were all gold diggers eyeing the family fortune. When Ryan first introduced Vivian, an ambitious law school graduate with modest means, Harvey's disapproval was immediate and unrelenting. Harvey often questioned Vivian's motives. "What do you want with my son?" he would sneer. Even after their marriage, he continued to intimidate her constantly, testing whether she'd break under the weight of family expectations. Over time, Ryan, initially her protector and champion, began to change. Business dealings, fatherly pressure, and the swirling chaos of managing an empire eroded the tenderness he once had. The world Ryan knew whispered into his ear, a wealthy man was always at risk of being used, of being weakened by emotional ties. Vivian had weathered it all, the condescending maids who were loyal to Harvey, the board members, who subtly reminded her she didn't have a proper pedigree, and her own husband's gradual withdrawal into secrecy. Yet she never imagined he'd banish her like a stranger. In one moment, the illusions of safety, belonging, and unconditional love shattered. At a luxury penthouse across the city, Ryan sat in a dimly lit study, swirling whiskey in a crystal tumbler. His father, Harvey, stood at the window looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The tension between them was palpable. "You did the right thing," son Harvey said in a gravelly voice. "I've seen her emails. She's been meeting with certain lawyers, and I have reason to believe she's planning to use that child as leverage." Ryan slammed the glass on the table, his frustration boiling over. "Enough, Dad. We've talked about this. Vivian is my wife. She's not after my money. I gave the order for her to stay away because I just needed time to think, not because I believe she's a gold digger." Harvey's lips tightened. "If you believe that, why did you order her away? You and I both know women have done worse, even forging paternity claims for a fraction of our fortune. With a child in the picture, if things go south, it'll cost you billions." Ryan felt a wave of nausea. Everything was about money, influence, brand image. For a moment, he questioned his own sanity. Why had he signed those documents? Why had he called security? Yet a dull ache in his chest reminded him that something had broken between him and Vivian. Maybe it was the argument they had that morning, Vivian's unwavering stance on investing her personal savings into a risky biotech startup. It didn't sound malicious or cunning. It was typical of her entrepreneurial spirit. But with Harvey fanning the flames, suspicion grew. Ryan had found messages in her phone referencing corporate expansions, confidentiality agreements with an unfamiliar finance firm, and clandestine lunches. All of it suggested secrets, collusions, maybe even betrayal. And so he'd erupted, demanding she leave until he could figure out the truth. It was the biggest decision of his life, and one he was already regretting. But regrets had no place in the Stockbridge empire. Harvey turned to face his son, his gaze icy. "If she's clean, she'll prove it. Until then, protect yourself." Ryan stared down at the swirling liquor, a pit in his stomach. He had exiled his pregnant wife, but the real tragedy was that a part of him still loved her. A part of him hoped that in forcing her out, he might discover if she truly cared for him, or the Stockbridge name. Much of Vivian's life was defined by perseverance. She was not born into wealth. Her mother ran a small bakery in Queens, scraping by to send Vivian to Catholic school, while her father spent his days as a technician for a local cable company. Her adolescence was filled with chores, part-time jobs, and unwavering ambition. She wanted to become someone who changed the world, her mother's unfulfilled dream. She earned scholarships for undergrad, then a spot at Columbia Law School. There she thrived, becoming fascinated with corporate law and startup culture. During a summer internship at a prominent law firm, she was assigned to a case that involved the Stockbridge family's philanthropic arm. She encountered Ryan Stockbridge, who had come to speak about a new education initiative. He was dashing, magnetic even. Their first conversation hovered between flirting and intellectual sparring, each one determined to outdo the other. They dated in secret for a while. Ryan insisted on privacy because his father was notoriously critical of his romantic involvements. In those early days, they bonded over big dreams. Vivian spoke passionately about wanting to start her own philanthropic organization for women in STEM. Ryan mused about new frontiers in technology. They laughed over coffee-shared late-night walks in Central Park and discovered an electric spark between them that made the city glow. When Harvey found out, he predictably disapproved. Yet something in Ryan refused to bow to his father's wishes. He proposed to Vivian in a small private ceremony at a rooftop garden, offering her a ring that once belonged to his late mother. Vivian thought it was a gesture of true love, an alliance against the cynicism of old money. She said yes, wholeheartedly. Their wedding was a quiet affair, performed at a private chapel in Italy. No tabloids, no lavish receptions, just a small gathering of close friends. It seemed perfect. But afterward, returning to New York was like stepping into a storm. Harvey's manipulative undertones wove through the staff and social circles. Rumors about Vivian being an opportunist, a cunning lawyer seeking a big score, circulated behind her back. Slowly, the isolation chipped away at the newlywed bliss. Vivian tried to remain resolute. She found respite in her own modest law practice, which primarily served underprivileged clients, ensuring they got fair settlements. The Stockbridge name brought her plenty of invitations to galas and charity dinners, yet each event was a harsh reminder she wasn't accepted. People looked at her suspiciously, waiting for her to slip up. Soon she discovered she was pregnant, a joyous surprise. She told Ryan in private, expecting him to light up with excitement. He was elated for a moment, but immediately the weight of his father's interference weighed on him. Harvey demanded paternity tests, insinuating the baby might not be Ryan's. Vivian was crushed. Though Ryan didn't believe such accusations, the doubt lingered in his eyes as well. By the time she was in her second trimester, their conversations felt stilted, forced. Intimacy had been replaced by disclaimers, lawyers, and the father's dominating presence. In her darkest moments, Vivian confided in an old friend from law school, Cynthia Rhodes, who'd left the legal field to start an investment advisory firm. Cynthia had a razor-sharp mind for finance and an empathy that made her a trusted confidant. She introduced Vivian to a group of female entrepreneurs, investors, biotech specialists, digital innovators, women determined to reshape industries. They saw in Vivian a steadfast ally who could navigate the legal labyrinth to make their dreams come true. And so in secret, Vivian began forging alliances and business deals. She never intended betrayal, only independence. Little did she know how drastically it would all be misread, and how quickly Ryan's insecurities would be lit aflame by Harvey's unwavering cynicism. Ryan was haunted by the memory of his mother, Celeste. She had been his only source of genuine affection in a household otherwise ruled by profit and status. She taught him kindness amidst opulence, to see people for who they were rather than for their net worth. But when she passed, Ryan became prone to second-guessing. His father's approach to life, trust, no one love, is a liability gradually crept into Ryan's psyche. Marrying Vivian had been an act of defiance against that worldview. Yet ironically, the seeds of paranoia his father planted were beginning to sprout. In the weeks leading to that fateful night of banishing Vivian, Ryan unearthed a series of unusual transactions. His personal accounts showed small but regular withdrawals by Vivian. They were not large enough to raise official alarm, but noticeable to a man like Ryan. Security footage captured her meeting with bankers from Goldman Sachs, and her phone logs included calls to a hedge fund manager rumored to be an enemy of the Stockbridge empire. She even attended an event featuring Elon Musk's latest venture in space tourism, though she told Ryan she was simply meeting an old classmate there. Perhaps she was simply exploring investment opportunities, but from Ryan's vantage point, it felt secretive. Then, after an argument where Vivian demanded more autonomy, more respect, and more control over her finances, Ryan froze. He had promised her a partnership, yet the more money she commanded, the further she drifted from him. When he questioned her about her legal associates, she deflected. When he pressed her on specifics, she insisted she couldn't divulge details due to client confidentiality. The final straw came when Ryan discovered legal documents discussing an exit plan and financial partition words that conjured images of divorce and monstrous settlements. Consumed by fear and under the steady drumbeat of Harvey's warnings, Ryan signed a set of orders placing house security on alert. Later that day, he told them to bar Vivian until further notice. It was a momentary panic, something he assumed would blow over once they cleared the air. But it escalated into the spectacle that left her standing alone in the driveway, suitcase at hand, banished from her own home. In the aftermath, Ryan's heart lurched with guilt. As he paced the penthouse study, he remembered seeing the pregnancy test, hearing her breathless excitement at the news. What had he done? He had turned into the one thing he swore never to be his father's loyal disciple. Vivian refused to let despair consume her. That same night, after turning away from the mansion, she checked into a discreet boutique hotel in Midtown. Once inside her modest suite, she sank onto the bed, tears finally breaching the dam she'd built up. She was frightened, betrayed, but also resolute. She gently placed her hand on her belly and whispered to the child, "I'll protect you. I promise." Seconds later, her phone rang. It was Cynthia. I heard Cynthia said voice tight with concern. "Rumors are swirling already, Viv. Are you all right?" Vivian inhaled, trying to steady herself. "I'll be fine. I just need some rest. Then we move forward." "Have you spoken to Ms. Alderman?" "Yes," Cynthia replied. "She's excited. With your endorsement, her biotech venture is ready to go public. This will be massive. Every major investor is on board." Vivian pulled up the ultrasound photo again, the flicker of determination returning to her eyes. "Then let's finalize it. No more waiting. My child's future depends on me building something indestructible. Let's show them what we're made of." That night, a clandestine meeting took place over encrypted video calls. Vivian, Cynthia, and a handful of female entrepreneurs convened. They discussed the final details of an unprecedented initial public offering, IPO, for a biotech firm focusing on regenerative medicine, a cutting-edge field that had the potential to transform healthcare. The founder, Dr. Naomi Alderman, was a Nobel Prize-nominated researcher. She'd developed a groundbreaking therapy that could expedite tissue regeneration in burn victims, among other applications. Major pharmaceutical giants were sniffing around to either buy out her research or crush her. But with Vivian's legal acumen and Cynthia's finance wizardry, they had crafted a strategy for Dr. Alderman to go public independently and secure funds for large-scale clinical trials. For months, the group had worked in secret, fearful that if the Stockbridges caught wind of it, they might stifle the project or overshadow the credit. Vivian was critical to bridging Dr. Alderman's science with the right corporate structure, especially in a ruthless market environment. Tonight, they set the final puzzle pieces in place. By dawn, the biotech firm Alderman Innovations would unveil its upcoming IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. Unknown to Ryan, the hush-hush documents he glimpsed were tied not to a divorce or scheme, but to a groundbreaking business venture. Exit plan referred to strategic approaches for the company's key stakeholders. Financial partition referred to how the founder's equity would be divided in the event of further expansions. It was a typical legal procedure, but from Ryan's vantage, it looked like the blueprint of a cunning gold digger. Unbeknownst to him, it was the blueprint of something that would rock Wall Street. That same night, while Vivian was barred from her home, she signed the final documents. In the quiet hum of her hotel room, with an unwavering heart, she placed her electronic signature on a digital contract that would forever alter the financial landscape and her destiny. Morning arrived with a whirlwind in Manhattan. Major financial news platforms, Bloomberg, CNBC, the Wall Street Journal buzzed with an unexpected announcement. Alderman Innovations, a previously under-the-radar biotech firm, had scheduled its IPO. Even more shocking was the reveal that Vivian Stockbridge, wife to one of the richest financiers in the city, was a principal investor and legal architect behind the company. Wall Street had been accustomed to seeing the Stockbridge name headlining major deals, but never this way. Typically, it was Ryan or Harvey unveiling new acquisitions. Now the name Vivian Stockbridge was splashed across financial bulletins, praising her as a champion of female-led innovation. The story was irresistible. A rising biotech star, backed by a quiet band of women entrepreneurs, ready to challenge the big pharmaceutical players. Overnight, Vivian became a symbol of disruptive growth. Reporters scrambled to confirm the details. Cynthia Rhodes, stepping forward as the official spokesperson, outlined how Alderman Innovations possessed patents so revolutionary that major hedge funds had been clamoring for a piece. She teased that the company's technology was so cutting-edge that it had potential to become the next Moderna or BioNTech, a household name with a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Ryan woke that morning to a tidal wave of calls. His personal assistant, Veronica, hammered on the penthouse door, phone in hand. "Sir, you need to see the news right now." Bleary-eyed Ryan flicked on a financial channel and nearly dropped his coffee mug. The anchor was discussing the upcoming IPO, emphasizing Vivian Stockbridge's critical role and praising her business genius in forging an alliance of top-flight investors. His mind spun in circles. So that's what she's been doing. A surge of conflicting emotions hit him relief that she wasn't scheming to divorce him for a payout fury, that she'd hidden such a monumental project from him, and oddly a flicker of pride that the woman he loved had orchestrated something so impressive. Yet overshadowing it all was the realization that the entire city now viewed her as a rising financial star in her own right, one who apparently needed no help from the Stockbridge empire. Harvey, on the other hand, was livid. He stormed into Ryan's penthouse, ignoring the doorman's protests. "You see what she's done? She's made you look like a fool. You ban her, and on the same night, she launches something that's overshadowing everything we've built." Ryan stared at the TV screens, flashing Vivian's name in bright letters. "She's brilliant," he muttered, half in awe, half in despair. "Don't glorify her," Harvey snapped. "You realize how this looks for us. Our investors will question our unity. They'll think the Stockbridge brand is fracturing, that we can't even manage our own household." "And maybe we can't," Ryan admitted. Voice hollow. "This is all my fault." At that, Harvey's brow furrowed. The old man had never seen his son so defeated. But decades of living in a cutthroat world had left Harvey numb to guilt. "If you won't fight back, I will. I'm calling an emergency meeting of our board to figure out how to manage this." Vivian might have done this for altruistic reasons, but I suspect she's playing a bigger game, maybe positioning herself to overshadow you. I won't let that happen." Ryan wanted to protest, but words failed him. A swirl of regret suffocated his thoughts. He remembered the night before, the echo of that gate slamming behind Vivian, the heartbreak in her eyes. "What have I done?" was the question echoing in his mind. Now she was out there forging her destiny without him, and it stung more than any corporate defeat ever could. By lunchtime, the Stockbridge mansion became the epicenter of frantic strategizing. Harvey rallied top lawyers, PR strategists, and financial advisors. The message was clear: the Stockbridge brand must not appear fractured. They had to control the narrative or risk losing billions in investor confidence. If word leaked that Ryan had banished his pregnant wife, the tabloids would have a field day. For once, Harvey and Ryan agreed on a single point: the scandal needed to be managed. Ryan felt torn apart. He hated the idea of attacking Vivian or discrediting her, yet the family's public relations gurus insisted on a statement that recast Vivian as a supportive partner in the family empire, someone acting with the full blessing of her husband. Ryan recognized the spin. It minimized her independence, swallowing her achievements into the Stockbridge narrative. It was classic corporate posturing. Simultaneously, the board explored whether they could quietly invest in Alderman Innovations. "If we can't beat them, we'll join them," some members quipped. Harvey, however, was vehemently against it. "We don't play second fiddle," he roared. "If anyone is going to revolutionize biotech under the Stockbridge name, it should be us." In the midst of the chaos, Ryan slipped away to a quiet office at the mansion, ignoring the stream of phone calls and messages. He needed a moment to think, or perhaps to feel. He dug into a drawer and found a small box containing mementos of his time with Vivian. Their wedding photos in Italy, the pressed flower she'd given him on their first date. A letter she wrote promising to stand by him, no matter how wild the storms. Staring at her handwriting, a wave of sorrow engulfed him. He recalled all the times she'd tried to speak to him about her ambitions, her desire to do something meaningful beyond being Mrs. Stockbridge. He'd nodded politely, but never fully grasped how passionate she was. Rather than show interest, he'd let his father's suspicions drown out her voice. Now she had soared on her own under the city's spotlight. "And I'm here, rummaging through old memories," he thought bitterly. She deserved better than me. His phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Ryan, if you care about your wife, let her tell her story. Don't twist the narrative. This is Cynthia Rhodes. Let her be who she is." Ryan's hands trembled. He remembered Cynthia, the friend and investment advisor. When they were first introduced, he found her to be sharp and unyielding, someone who rarely bent to intimidation. He couldn't help but feel an odd sense of gratitude that Vivian had such a friend, someone who would stand up for her in a moment like this. Ryan typed a reply but hesitated. He realized he had nothing to say that could undo the damage. Another wave of shame rolled over him. With a resigned sigh, he rose from the chair, bracing himself to face the board, the father he once idolized, and the unstoppable wave of consequences he had set in motion. Outside the grand doors of the Stockbridge estate, a swarm of paparazzi had gathered, jostling for any photo, any comment. Rumors were exploding on social media, #Vivian. Stockbridge was trending on Twitter, with users speculating about a secret power couple clash. Some alleged that she was divorcing Ryan. Others claimed the entire biotech IPO was part of a grand plan to overshadow her husband's empire. Conspiracy theories blossomed like weeds in a neglected garden. Inside the PR war room, phones buzzed ceaselessly. In times past, the Stockbridges would release a simple, measured statement, and the world would accept it. But this was different. Vivian had become a sensation in her own right, apart from the Stockbridge name. Finally, they drafted a formal press release. It read, "The Stockbridge family fully supports the innovative endeavors of Alderman Innovations and applauds Vivian Stockbridge for her dedication to groundbreaking technologies. We look forward to exploring potential synergies with our family foundation and congratulate her for bringing vital solutions to global markets." Harvey bristled reading it. It sounded too conciliatory for his liking, but legal counsel insisted that attacking Vivian would backfire. The statement was released by mid-afternoon, leading to a flurry of headlines. "Stockbridge congratulates wife's venture. Family stays united in face of IPO. Surprise." Behind the scenes, speculation raged about the real story. Was this truly a sign of support or a desperate bid for damage control? Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Vivian stepped out of a black SUV at the headquarters of Alderman Innovations. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. She wore a simple navy maternity dress, a calm smile on her face, her hair pulled back in a low chignon. She exuded poise, even as her heart pounded with anxiety. Standing next to her was Dr. Naomi Alderman, the brilliant scientist, and Cynthia, who discreetly guided them through the press chaos. One journalist yelled, "Mrs. Stockbridge, does your husband endorse this IPO, or is there conflict in the marriage?" Another asked, "Are you still living at the Stockbridge mansion?" Vivian paused, her hand drifting protectively over her belly. She cleared her throat and spoke. "I'm here today to celebrate Alderman Innovations and the transformative research Dr. Alderman has pioneered. We have every intention of bringing life-saving technologies to patients worldwide. I hope everyone will focus on the science and the future rather than my personal matters." Still, the questions rained down, some about Ryan, some about her pregnancy. Vivian held her composure, offering carefully worded responses that neither confirmed nor denied any rumors. Within minutes, security ushered her into the building. Inside, staff members broke into spontaneous applause, buoyed by the news coverage and the historic wave of enthusiasm for their upcoming launch. For the first time, Vivian felt what true partnership and respect could be like, unfiltered by cynicism, not overshadowed by a controlling father-in-law or suspicious husband. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like nothing could touch Alderman Innovations. The media lauded their live demonstration as a biotech triumph. News outlets replayed clips of synthetic tissue healing before stunned regulators. Vivian's speech was quoted across finance blogs and academic journals alike. Phrases like "pregnant disruptor" and "the woman who shook Wall Street" flooded social media. Investors flooded Cynthia's inbox. Analysts scrambled to re-evaluate projections. But in the volatile world of high finance, triumph can be terrifyingly fragile. Less than 48 hours later, news broke of a sweeping European Union regulation overhaul targeting clinical biotech firms. The changes were abrupt and strict: more documentation, longer trial requirements, and slower approval pipelines. The ripple effect was immediate. Global biotech stocks began to tumble. Pre-IPO valuations for even established players saw sudden drops, and Alderman Innovations, despite its momentum, was no exception. Inside their modest headquarters, the atmosphere shifted from electric to tense. Phones rang non-stop. Partners who were previously enthusiastic began pulling back, suddenly cautious. Potential investors who had just stood applauding in their demonstration hall now requested meetings to reassess terms. Venture firms who had verbally pledged millions hesitated. No contracts had been signed yet. Vivian sat at the edge of the long glass conference table, her hand resting instinctively on her stomach. The glow from the market ticker outside cast flickering shadows on her face. She wasn't panicked yet, but she could feel the momentum stalling. Cynthia entered a tablet in hand, and tension in her jaw. We've had 4 major funds pause negotiations. They want to wait until the EU clarifies its language. Some are demanding clauses that would cut our valuation in half. Naomi Alderman stood at the whiteboard, rubbing out projections she had written only days ago. This regulation isn't even relevant to our first 2 markets, but the psychology of it, these investors smell weakness. Vivian nodded slowly. Fear spreads faster than facts. She looked around the room at the circle of women who had fought for months to build something revolutionary. This wasn't just about money. It was about momentum, about making the market believe in them. And right now, doubt was seeping in like water through a cracked foundation. We need to respond immediately. And publicly, Vivian said, sitting upright. Not just to our investors. This needs to be a market-facing declaration. We reinforce trust by doubling down on transparency. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. You're thinking a press event? More than that, Vivian replied. We invite regulators, scientists, journalists. Another showcase. This time, we don't just demonstrate, we prove our resilience. Dr. Alderman hesitated. What if they don't show? Vivian's voice didn't waver. They will, because they want to believe in something right now, and we'll give them every reason to. Across the city, Ryan watched the headlines unfold from his penthouse. Alderman's IPO, once a surefire success, now had a question mark beside it. News anchors speculated if Vivian's rise was too good to be true. He hated that, not because it reflected poorly on him, but because he knew how hard she had worked for this. He had witnessed the layers of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the boardroom meetings she took with swollen ankles, the quiet heartbreak she endured without ever letting it derail her mission. He knew this wasn't about headlines for her. It was about legacy. And now the world was trying to shake her foundation. He paced, torn. He still had connections, ones that could help. Over the years, he'd built quiet but influential relationships with biotech regulators in DC and Europe. One call could cut through red tape. One email could bring credibility back into Vivian's corner. But would she want his help? Ryan looked down at a message on his phone. It was from one of those old regulatory contacts. Is Alderman's science real? Should we bother attending this second event? Ryan stared at the screen. Then he replied, yes, it's real, and so is she. He didn't sign his name. He didn't need to. That night he made 6 discreet calls, to allies, to former colleagues, to quiet, powerful people who owed him favors, not as a Stockbridge heir, not as an investor, but as a man trying to undo a fracture he had caused. He didn't tell Vivian. He didn't want credit. He only wanted the world to see what he had seen too late, a woman who wouldn't fold under pressure, a woman who didn't just belong in the arena, she commanded it. Back at Alderman's office, Vivian watched the sun dip below the skyline. She had just finished rewriting her pitch for the second demonstration. Every word had been sharpened, every claim backed by citations, every number verified. Her back ached, her feet were swollen, but her resolve unshakable. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "They won't stop us. Not now, not ever. Because this wasn't just about a company anymore. This was about proving that strength doesn't always roar. It sometimes walks into the storm pregnant and uninvited and dares the world to underestimate it again. The day of the live demonstration had arrived, and with it came a current of anticipation that swept across Manhattan like a brewing storm. The conference center in the heart of the financial district had been transformed into a gleaming stage for alderman innovations. A biotech firm no one had heard of 6 months ago, now hailed as the future of regenerative medicine. Inside the venue, the air crackled with energy. Investors, scientists, government regulators, and media figures packed into the auditorium. Each guest had received a personalized invitation, Cynthia's way of signaling exclusivity. And it worked. Even skeptics known for publicly dismissing small biotech startups had shown up in tailored suits with guarded curiosity. Behind the stage, Vivian sat in the green room, nerves gnawing at her. At nearly 7 months pregnant, the weight of both her child and the moment settled heavily on her body. Her hands rested on her belly, steadying herself. Her face was pale, but composed, her lips rehearsing the words of her speech for the 100th time. She had walked through betrayal, exile, and humiliation. Now all eyes would be on whether she could deliver not just hope, but proof. Cynthia peeked through the curtain and turned to Vivian. "The room's full. We've got reps from the FDA, the World Health Organization, Goldman Sachs, even a few delegates from the European Medical Council." Vivian forced a tight smile. "Good. Let them see us. Let them see this." "And your husband?" Cynthia asked softly. Vivian hesitated. "He's not invited. But I wouldn't be surprised if he found his way in." Cynthia nodded. "Just remember, Viv, you earned this stage. Every second of it." With that, the two women walked toward the wings of the stage. The lights dimmed. A hush fell. Cynthia stepped forward to open the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and commanding, "welcome to the beginning of a new era in regenerative medicine. Today we don't ask for your belief, we show you why it's deserved." Applause rippled through the room. Then came Dr. Naomi Alderman, flanked by 2 lab technicians. She dived into the science, her tone passionate but precise. She spoke of damaged tissue immune responses and the body's ability to heal if only science could catch up. Behind her, a giant screen lit up with footage from clinical trials. Then came the live demonstration. Technicians rolled out a sterile glass unit containing synthetic muscle tissue. In real time, Alderman's team applied a sample of their regenerative therapy. As a high-resolution camera zoomed in, the crowd watched the cells begin to fuse, accelerated healing taking place before their eyes. A stunned silence followed. Then gasps, then murmurs. One of the regulators stood up to get a closer look. After several minutes, Alderman stepped back and said simply, "This is not a simulation. It's a live demonstration of our technology already undergoing human trials." The room erupted in applause. When it finally died down, Cynthia introduced the next speaker, Vivian Stockbridge, lead legal architect and strategic advisor to Alderman Innovations. Vivian stepped into the spotlight. Gone was the nervous woman from the green room. Here stood someone radiant with quiet authority. She began slowly grounding her audience in the realities of startup financing and regulatory pressure, then pivoted to the broader picture. This technology, she said, doesn't just represent a breakthrough in medicine. It represents a shift in how innovation can thrive when built on collaboration, equity, and ethical leadership. The Alderman team is ready for market scaling, protected by 6 global patents and backed by diverse private funding. We are not here to sell a fantasy. We are here to lead a transformation. She paused, letting the words settle. I was told I didn't belong in boardrooms, that I didn't understand the game, that my voice didn't matter unless it echoed a legacy name. But today, I'm not asking for permission. Today, I'm part of something that speaks for itself. The crowd rose to their feet. A standing ovation rang out, echoing across the conference center. From the side of the room, hidden just beyond the spotlight, Ryan Stockbridge watched with awe. He had slipped in unnoticed, escorted by a discreet security team. He wasn't there to grandstand or make a scene. He had come to see her. And as he stood there watching Vivian hold the room in the palm of her hand, something inside him cracked, something long buried beneath layers of ego and indoctrination. He wasn't just witnessing a presentation. He was watching the woman he loved become the woman he had never truly seen. After the event, as guests swarmed the stage, regulators lining up to shake hands and investors pledging millions in support, Vivian quietly stepped off to the side, needing air. The emotional weight of it all had begun to settle into her bones. Then she felt a familiar presence. She turned. Ryan stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes shining not with corporate pride, but something raw regret, admiration, maybe even love. "Vivian," he said softly, "you were extraordinary." She blinked. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said, "but I had to come. Not to fix anything, just to see you shine, and to say I'm sorry." She folded her arms, still guarded. "Sorry doesn't change what happened." "I know," he repeated. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I made some calls. Quietly. To regulatory officials. I never claimed credit, and I won't. I just wanted to help. Not as a Stockbridge. As the father of your child." Vivian's walls trembled. He looked at her more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "You don't owe me anything. But if there's still a chance, even a small one, I'll do the work. I'll earn it. Not with words, with actions." She stared at him for a long moment, the hum of voices fading behind her. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about what kind of life our child is born into. And if you want to be part of that, it has to be on my terms. No shadows, no doubts." "I'll follow your lead," he said, voice steady. "Just give me the chance." Vivian didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but it was something, a beginning. And as the stock ticker continued to climb on the building screens outside the world, began to see what she had always known deep down. She didn't need the Stockbridge name to rise. But it was time the Stockbridges learned what it meant to stand beside someone who could soar. The days after the demonstration moved with a surreal velocity. Alderman Innovations was no longer just a promising name in biotech. It was now the center of every conversation on Wall Street. Pre-IPO valuations had doubled. Financial publications hailed the demonstration as one of the most impressive in a decade. The woman who had once been known only as Mrs. Stockbridge was now hailed as the visionary leading a movement. Vivian tried to keep herself grounded in the work. She emphasized team achievements, highlighting Dr. Alderman's breakthrough research and Cynthia's relentless financial coordination. But the headlines refused to let her blend into the background. The media had crowned her with a new title, the pregnant powerhouse of Wall Street. Back at the Stockbridge estate, Harvey fumed. The success of Alderman Innovations wasn't just unexpected, it was infuriating. He had banked on her failure, even encouraged Ryan to exile her based on a toxic cocktail of suspicion and control. And now Vivian was outshining every recent Stockbridge initiative. Investors were whispering. Board members were asking questions. "She's humiliating us," Harvey roared during a tense meeting. "I built this empire from the ground up, and now my own daughter-in-law, my disgrace of a daughter-in-law, is stealing the spotlight." Ryan sat quietly at the far end of the room. He'd been quiet a lot lately, watching, thinking, unraveling the lies he had once mistaken for protection. Harvey's voice thundered again, demanding action. "Do something, Ryan. Release a statement. Publicly distance the Stockbridge name. Make it clear she doesn't speak for this family." But something in Ryan broke. "No," he said, his voice low but firm. Harvey blinked. "What did you just say?" "I said no," Ryan repeated, rising from his chair. "Vivian hasn't humiliated us. She's simply shown what she's capable of. Something I should have recognized long before you poisoned my view of her." Harvey's face turned a shade redder. "You think you can defend her and survive in this business? You'll regret crossing me. You're nothing without my name." Ryan let out a slow breath. "Maybe, but I'm done being your puppet." He crossed the room, grabbed his jacket, and paused at the doorway. "I chose wrong once, Dad. I won't make that mistake again. I banished my wife because of your paranoia. I broke her trust because I let you define what loyalty meant. But now I choose her. I choose my child. And I choose a future that doesn't revolve around fear." Then he walked out, leaving behind not just the room, but a legacy of control that had stifled him for too long. For the first time in his adult life, Ryan Stockbridge made a decision, not as a son of an emperor, but as a man trying to repair what he had shattered. The morning dawned bright and golden over the skyline of Manhattan, casting a warm glow over Wall Street. For most, it was just another trading day. But for Vivian Stockbridge, it marked the beginning of something far greater: vindication, rebirth, and power reclaimed. Outside the New York Stock Exchange, a buzz of anticipation filled the air. Crowds gathered as camera crews jockeyed for position. News anchors rehearsed their scripts, and a banner unfurled across the facade of the building: Alderman Innovations IPO, pioneering the future of regenerative medicine. Among the figures arriving through the grand columns of the exchange, Vivian moved with a composed grace. Dressed in a tailored, deep emerald maternity gown that draped elegantly over her baby bump, she exuded poise and calm. Her hands rested lightly on her belly, both protective and proud. At 7 months pregnant, she looked radiant, and for the first time in weeks, she felt truly at peace. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Reporters snapped photos. Tech analysts whispered in corners. A large LED screen above the trading floor displayed the opening price of Alderman Innovations stock. On stage stood Dr. Naomi Alderman, radiant with nervous energy, and Cynthia Rhodes, flanked by a boardroom of women who had spent months grinding in secret for this very moment. Vivian stood beside them quietly, soaking it all in. When the bell rang, confetti burst into the air. A roar filled the room as the first stock price appeared, $38.65, up nearly 40% from the projected range. Within minutes, the ticker climbed higher and higher. The company was a hit. No, it was a phenomenon. The day that Ryan and Harvey had once ruled as their exclusive domain now belonged to her. Financial analysts were already scrambling to update projections. Some compared Alderman innovations to the early days of Moderna. Others called it the dawn of a new biotech frontier. But none of the headlines mattered more to Vivian than the one flashing across Times Square. Vivian Stockbridge co-leads biotech breakout Wall Street's Wahoo powerhouse. In the swirl of celebration, Vivian noticed a familiar figure lingering in the back, partially hidden near the edge of the trading floor. Ryan. Their eyes met. He looked humbled. Smaller than she remembered, not in stature, but in presence. His tailored suit couldn't mask the regret etched into his face. Slowly, cautiously, she made her way to him. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said softly. "I had to come," he replied. "To see you. To see this. What you've built. I don't expect you to forget what I did, or forgive it. But I needed to tell you, Vivian. I am so proud of you." His voice broke on the last words. Vivian's breath caught. The applause, the flashing lights, the power, all of it fell away in that moment. What remained was the ache of a wound still healing. "You hurt me, Ryan. Deeply. You left me when I needed you the most," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you're here now, and I see it in your eyes you've changed." "I want to be better," he said quickly. "Not for the Empire, not for my father. For you, and our child. I don't care about the power or the press. I care about earning your trust back." Vivian studied him, her heart wavering between pain and possibility. "This isn't about just saying the right words anymore," she replied, steady but kind. "It's about doing the right things. If you want to be part of our lives, you'll have to walk beside me, not in front of me, not behind me." Ryan nodded. "I'm ready. I'll earn it. Day by day. No more ego, no more pride." Vivian reached for his hand and held it gently. She didn't promise anything. Not yet. But in that moment, she didn't pull away either. They stood side by side, a pregnant mother and a repentant husband, under the glow of the LED tickers. Around them, Alderman Innovations continued to soar its stock, now surpassing $50 per share. Cheers rose once more from the trading floor. Photographers captured the moment from across the room. Vivian's presence was magnetic. A woman once cast out, now celebrated. A mother once doubted, now elevated. And a name, once hidden behind a billionaire's shadow, now burning bright in her own right. A new dawn had arrived, not just for biotech, not just for the markets, but for Vivian Stockbridge. And this time, it was hers. A brilliant mind, a daring dream, and a woman who turned her heartbreak into the catalyst for a biotech revolution that is Vivian Stockbridge's story. Banned from her own home at her most vulnerable moment, she channeled her pain into one of the most remarkable IPOs in recent Wall Street history. Along the way, she taught her husband the true meaning of trust, shattering generations of cynicism. Her journey reminds us that even in the darkest of times, opportunity awaits those brave enough to seize it. If you were moved by Vivian's triumph, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends who need inspiration, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that prove resilience is stronger than any barrier. By joining our community, you help spread messages of hope and empowerment around the globe. Together, let's celebrate stories that spark change.